Hello everyone. You learned what operator associativity is. It's difficult to come up with completely new exercises on this topic because the material itself isn't very complex. However, operator associativity does appear in code, so let's work through 3 exercises where it definitely comes into play. Try to solve these exercises on your own first, and then watch how I solve them. Exercise 1. A car starts a trip with a certain amount of fuel. During the trip, it uses some fuel on the first part of the route, and then some more on the second part. The user enters the amount of fuel at the beginning of the trip, the fuel used on the first part, and the fuel used on the second part. Calculate the amount of fuel left using a single expression. For now, the structure of my code hasn't changed, so if you watched the previous lessons, you should already understand everything. We have 3 input blocks for the values required by the tasks. But we can discuss the first variable because its name is somewhat questionable. Imagine that you see this line, fuel equals 10. Would you understand what it means? If you don't know the context, probably not. Also, look at the message that tells the user what to enter. Do you think it really helps them understand what value they should provide? Not really, because the unit of measurement isn't specified. It could be liters, gallons, or even bottles of fuel. It's unclear, and I'll tell you more. The task itself doesn't specify this either. I did that intentionally because you need to understand that task descriptions won't always be perfectly clear. Sometimes the person who writes the task simply forgets or doesn't realize that more information needs to be provided so another person can solve it correctly. Since there is nobody to ask for clarification here, we can make the clarification ourselves. So let's assume the fuel is measured in liters. I could add that clarification to the input messages and also to comments near the variables, and that would be the correct thing to do. But to keep things moving, let's go straight to the calculations. To calculate how much fuel is left, we need to subtract the fuel consumption for both parts of the trip from the total amount of fuel. By the way, that's a good reason to add the word total to the variable name. Here, the associativity of the subtraction operator comes into play. Subtraction is evaluated from left to right. So first part consumption is subtracted from fuel, and then second part consumption is subtracted from the result. Let's run the program and see the result. Exercise 2. You have a file of a certain size. First, its contents are distributed equally among several servers. Then the data on each server is divided into several smaller parts. The user enters the file size, the number of servers, the number of parts on each server. Calculate the size of one part. Here we have the same problem. The unit of this file size is not specified, so I decided to use megabytes. But this time I make that clear in the task itself, in the input message, and I even add a corresponding prefix to the variable name. Next, I enter the number of servers and the number of parts stored on each server. Now we just need to calculate the result. To do that, we take the file size divided by the number of servers and then divide the result by the number of parts on each server. This gives us the size of one part, which we then print to the screen. Let's run the program. Exercise 3. A program has 3 independent counters. After the system is reset, all 3 counters should receive the same value. Create 3 variables and do the rest. Ask the user to enter a new value. Then, using a single expression, assign this value to all 3 counters. After that, print the values of all 3 counters. Okay, here we only need to use chained assignment on a single line. We enter a new value, then create all of our counters and assign the same value to each of them. The assignment operator is right-to-left associative, so the third counter receives the new value first, then the second counter, and finally the first counter. If the associativity worked in the opposite direction, we would first assign the uninitialized value of the second counter to the first counter, and so on. Let's run the program and check whether all the counters have the same value. That's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.